Yo, since I'm making these Instagram videos, I thought about topics that you guys had asked for some portion of time, and I never did. One question that was probably asked 3 or 4 times on Flow, and it was funny because we would always do it at the end, like questions section. It was, who are my favorite scramblers? Not my favorite, the best scramblers. Who are the best scramblers? And I always said, I need time to think about it, and then we always forgot to bring it up again. So I would have done this on FRL had someone brought it up and said, Ben, I need you to make a list and give me a bunch of time. So I decided to make a list last night of my favorite scramblers. Now, let me give some qualifications to this. So one of the things I think about scrambling is I think that it's a natural extension of wrestling. So someone with a high crotch, they get in great position. A sprawl is no longer relevant, it will not work. So then, okay, what do I do next, right? Same thing with a single leg, go single, etc., etc., etc. Now, there are too many people who want to force scrambles. They want to force it when it's not actually there, right? So they try doing these things, and to me, that's not a good scrambler. That is someone who scrambles a lot, but not a good scrambler, because they're trying to use things when they shouldn't be using things. And so the best scramblers, they may not even scramble all that much, right? I'm not going to pick guys who don't scramble at all, but there are some guys on the list who they don't use scrambling as a primary means of scoring, but they use it very, very functionally when necessary. And so kind of the way I'm thinking about it is, what percentage of scrambles do they win that they're in? And if it's someone who loses a decent chunk, even if they scramble a lot, I'm probably not considering that person because they're probably not using it functionally enough to make the wrestling really good. So yes, almost everyone on my list is a very, very, very high level wrestler. There's very few people who made the list who are not like a top 3, top 4 at NCAAs, NCAA champion type, so, and they're, like a guy like a Ja'Cory Teamer, very good scrambler, tricky, but, I think Pipe overuses it. What was he like? Brock Hardy, I kind of feel the same way about him, really tricky, but again, maybe overuses it. Let's see, who else? Then there's someone like Kyle Dake, who's on the opposite side. He's an elite scrambler. Didn't make my list because he just doesn't use it quite enough, but he is, like, when he does get into scrambles, he's very, very elite. So I'll tell you who got on my list, who did not quite make my list. There's only one heavyweight, Mike McMullen. Ja'Cory Teamer, Mitchell Messenrick, I think he's going to get there eventually. He's only 1 year of work, right, out of his 4 years. Meyer Shapiro, another guy I'm really interested in. I think he does a great job with certain things. Ridge Lovett, Brock Hardy, Max Dean, Jane Cox. He was, I was debating putting him in there, and I just, I didn't think he used it quite enough. And then I guess one of the other things I was thinking was diversity of scrambles. Like, do they just do one thing? And there's one person on my top 10 list who really does almost did just one thing, it feels like, and was good enough to make it on the list. But most of the guys, I feel like they need to have a diversity of scrambles. So maybe some far ankle, maybe some crotch lock, maybe some leg passing, maybe some sit in the corner, maybe some Trello position, like a bunch of different positions. And then obviously I've only picked from like the last 20 years because film is not accessible prior to then, right? You can't really find film from 30 years ago or 40 years ago to actually watch these guys enough to know, hey, how legit were they? And the other thing is, I think we're entering an era, and if you think, like, there's a bunch of Penn State guys on my list, but you think the current Penn State guys, they don't actually scramble that much, so we're in an era where everyone's so good at scrambling, sometimes the best path is to actually avoid the scramble, right, to score with a clean arm drag, go behind, something that's where the scramble is not engaged. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to put them in order because that's just too freaking hard. I'm going to tell you my 10, give you a few sentences about that person, why I think they're good, and then I did pick a number one. Okay, so first person on the list, Keegan O'Toole. Obviously, I'm biased, but he's freaking great. He can do all of the scrambles, sit the corner, Chirella, far ankle, crotch lock. He has used them in some very opportune moments. I think of his Big 12 win against David Carr or his Nationals win against David Carr, scored on a crotch lock in both of those. I think about his performance at the Worlds. He scored many scrambles there. So Keegan is very diverse, very good. Makes it very high on my list, although like I said, I'm not going 1 through 10. Spencer Lee. This may be a surprise, but if you actually watch Spencer when he gets put into bed, it's pretty freaking rare that he loses. He does not lose a lot of scrambles. He has a great sense of balance. He is able to hold position. He's able to shrink his body to the mat really, really well. And then if I even have to be more specific, and the Spencer lovers might get mad at me for this, specifically his dad, When he's not tired, he doesn't lose scrambles. When he's fresh, it's so rare. Now, as the match goes on and he maybe gets a little more tired, maybe he loses a couple more. That's a cardio thing, not a scramble thing to me. But if fresh Spencer does not lose a lot of scrambles, it's pretty freaking rare. Next guy on my list is a guy that everyone would think of. Yanni. He kind of like Tegan, very, very diverse in his scramble skill set, does a lot of different things, able to wrestle from many positions, doesn't lose a lot, loses once in a while in the scrambles, specifically freestyles where he's kind of struggled more. You think of like a Nick Lee, a Zane match where he gave up like a 2-2. So he has lost some more in that, but he is as elite as it gets. So Yanni. Sammy Sasso, he's one that if I had to rank the top 10, may end up a little bit lower because I do think he uses what we call the Terrell position, which is where you're hanging over the side on the single leg. For the cradle, I don't want to say he's exclusive to that position, but he uses that position a lot. Now he's very, very, very good at that position, but he doesn't do all of the different scrambles as much as certain other people. All right, next on my list, Seth Gross. He's very diverse in the scrambles. His body moves in a very unique way. I have wrestled around with him. He's very, very good. Tricky. He has a really good shin whizzer. He's got the Trella. He's got a really good hip tip where he goes out and grabs the bottom arm. Yanni does that one also. So there's a lot of really unique tools and weapons. Very good. Man, I think I said they're all really good. Almost everyone on this list, or maybe everyone on this list, is an NCAA champ. It's very close. All right, next one. Bo Nickel. So Bo Nickel, actually I would say, and it's funny, me and Tommy Rollins, in my very first wrestling podcast, I remember we did this segment where we kind of picked out a younger guy and maybe picked on some of their flaws. And one of Bo's flaws early on was he was too reliant on his scrambling, and he couldn't generate his own offense all that much, and that caused him to lose some matches that he maybe could have won had he been able to do that. And that was a problem he for sure solved as his career went on. And so then when you can be more offensive, it makes it harder for the person to anti-scramble you or not scramble you. When certain guys who rely on scrambling too much, what they do is they stand around and wait for the person to shoot. Well, once everyone knows you're a good scrambler and you're tricky, but they also know you're not going to do any offense, they can stand around and wait for the opportune time to attack. They don't have to force, right? They don't have to force anything. And maybe earlier when the scramble wasn't as well known, people might have tried forcing things. Now they don't have to, right? So, but when Bo Nickel figured out how to put pressure on during more of his own offense, it put him in more of the positions. And he's another guy, one of the best things about him, and why he would probably actually go really high on my list, was he had the ability to pin from a lot of places, which is that's like the dagger, right? Because if you can not only score takedowns and then back points and then pin them off of the scramble, now it makes you extra dangerous because they don't even want to engage in anything with you because they know once they engage, they might end up on their back and get pinned. So you think of he hit the Sploidal on Sammy Brooks. He had a few other big matches were hitting nice cradles. So very diverse, very tricky, and could put the dagger in. So that was big bonus points for that. Jesse Delgado, he might be one that was a little too one-sided, but when I think of leg pass, I think of Jesse Delgado. Very specifically, we won a couple matches. Like his ability to get there against, say, Nashawn Garrett in the NCAA finals was it was unbelievably fast. The way he was able to get from getting shot on back down to the leg and past the leg. So Delgado, he was tricky. He could scramble from other positions, obviously, also, but very specifically, if you said, "Hey Ben, who's the best leg passer in the last 20 years?" I'm pretty sure it's Jesse Delgado by a long shot. So another guy, super tricky. All right, 2 left, and then I got my number 1. So Dylan Ness. Now this is a guy who I debated not putting him on this list because I do think he forced scrambles too much, and he was one that he definitely lost some ones. You think about certain ones he tried to force against IMR. It did not end up very well for him. So that would kind of probably put him towards the bottom of my top 10. But then on the other side, like I said, Bo Nickel, he had the dagger, right? He could pin people for sure off a lot of these things. So Dylan Ness he was a roller coaster ride. He was playing with fire. He did some really great things. He also got caught, probably more than anyone else on this list. He probably got caught in dangerous positions. But he was fun to watch. All right. 1 left, and then my best scrambler. on the list. So my last one is the one I just talked about in the last video, David Taylor. Um, he's maybe not thought of as much as a scrambler because he's so dynamic offensively in so many different ways. But again, if you go back to his college days and you watch him in some of those scrambles, maybe especially when he was younger, because he wasn't quite as dominant. He was so fluid. He could score from a lot of different places. He scored 2 scrambles. His 2013 U.S. Open against Jordan Burroughs, right? He hit him with 2 like Sanderson steel, Troll, cradle type positions. So he had a lot of different positions he could score from. He was good from almost all of the scrambles, but it just did come to a point where he was so dynamic offensively, he maybe didn't use his scrambles quite as much as he got older. All right, now number 1 on my list. This is one of my favorite people to watch wrestle, and he did some things, and this is probably maybe I'm giving him too much credit. There's potential, but I like inventors. I like creators, and Jason Nolf was able to invent and create some positions that I think I'm actually kind of blown away that more people don't use the things that he used because they are highly functional. I use them myself. I think like, damn, why didn't I think of that? That's obvious. Like, how did I miss that? And so Nolf, and he has maybe not been able to make the jump, although he did just beat Jordan Burroughs, right? Not been able to make the jump to the senior level freestyle. I mean, he's really good, probably top 10 in the world, but never made the team yet. Whereas as a college folk style wrestler, his resume can stack up with just about anyone. He was just about as good as it gets. He was fun. He was dynamic. He was willing to put himself in bad positions. He had a really, really good diversity and array of scrambles that he could use. And so for that reason, Jason Nolf is my number 1 scrambler in the last 20 years. He's so fun to watch. Man, I just think about him and Keegan last year. Like, I could have watched them wrestle for hours. Like, they wrestled in a 6-minute match, and it was so fun. I could have watched them wrestle for hours. So that's my list. You guys have been asking me. Sorry, I never put the time into it. I did now. Hope you like it. And then I hope you can actually learn something from the way I qualify what makes a good scrambler. You're not a good scrambler if you just try to force scrambles for the sake of scrambles. You're a good scrambler because you adequately use the scrambles when they're necessary in real wrestling matches.